I'm not what you'd call the suspicious type. 15 years of marriage teaches you to pick your battles, and I'd always figured Alicia for the straight and narrow sort. She went to church on Sundays, remembered my mother's birthday, never so much as got a parking ticket. But once you start seeing the cracks, they're everywhere. The work trips multiplied like rabbits in spring. Used to be maybe one every few months. Regional training, corporate meetings, the usual corporate nonsense. Suddenly, she was traveling twice a month, sometimes more. Always somewhere within driving distance, always returning with stories that sounded rehearsed. "How was Dallas?" I'd ask. "Oh, boring presentations, terrible hotel food. I'm just glad to be home." Except the hotel receipt I found crumpled in her jacket pocket was from a place called Mountain View Resort, which sounded more like a romantic getaway than a corporate conference center. And Dallas was a 12-hour drive away, but she'd only been gone for 2 days. I started paying attention to the patterns. The trips always fell on weekends. She'd leave Friday afternoon, come back Sunday evening, and spend Monday morning doing laundry with the focus of someone scrubbing away evidence. Her phone, which used to sit on the kitchen counter during dinner, now lived permanently in her purse or pocket. "Work's been crazy," she'd explain when I asked about the constant texting. "You know how it is." Except I didn't know how it is, because my job doesn't require me to smile at my phone like I'm reading love letters during Sunday morning coffee. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in October. Alicia was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Can't wait for our retreat this weekend. Room 237 is perfect for what we discussed. D." Not a coworker named Deborah or Diane. The contact was saved as Dom with a flexing muscle emoji. Real professional. I sat there staring at that phone like it might explode. 15 years of marriage, and my wife was getting cute texts from someone named Dom who apparently had opinions about hotel room selections. The steel in my spine developed its first major crack right then and there. But here's the thing about being an operations manager. You learn to think systematically. You don't just react to problems, you analyze them, develop solutions, create contingency plans. So instead of confronting Alicia right there in the bedroom, I decided to do some research. Dominic Reyes turned out to be easy enough to find. 36 years old, supervisor at Alicia's company, divorced 2 years ago. His social media was full of gym selfies and motivational quotes about taking what you deserve and living your best life. He looked like the kind of guy who used protein powder as a food group and thought cargo shorts were formal wear. The timeline started making sense. Alicia's gym membership that she never used, her sudden interest in team building exercises at work, the new clothes she claimed were professional development, all of it pointed to one conclusion: my wife was having an affair with a muscle-bound corporate climber who probably thought synergy was a legitimate business strategy. I could have confronted her right then, could have thrown the evidence in her face and demanded explanations, but that's not how you handle structural failures in steel. And it's not how I was going to handle this. Instead, I started planning. My buddy Richard threw a Halloween party every year, and this year's invitation had already been sitting on our refrigerator for weeks. Alicia loved costume parties, another thing I'd apparently misunderstood about her. She'd been talking about her outfit for months, some elaborate Catwoman thing that required more leather than a motorcycle shop. "You're coming as what?" she'd asked when I mentioned my costume plans. "Pirate," I said. "Got the hat and everything." She'd laughed, the same laugh she used to give me when we were dating, and I'd say something unexpectedly funny. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I was imagining everything. Almost. Then her phone buzzed with another message from Dom, and the moment passed. The party was set for the Saturday after next. Alicia had mentioned that several people from her work would be there, including some of the newer supervisors. I had a feeling Dom would be making an appearance, probably in something that showed off those gym muscles he was so proud of. Perfect. Because if there's one thing I learned from 15 years of managing steel production, it's that the best way to test structural integrity is to apply pressure at the weak points and see what breaks first. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Not just the costume, though I did find a pretty decent pirate hat at the thrift store, but everything else. I opened a separate bank account, quietly transferred some funds, and had a long conversation with my lawyer about asset protection, just in case. because when steel fails, it doesn't just bend, it snaps, and everything connected to it goes flying. I wanted to make sure I was standing in a safe place when that happened. The night before the party, Alicia spent an hour getting ready for bed, which was about 55 minutes longer than usual. She moisturized everything twice, did some kind of face mask that smelled like cucumber, and spent 20 minutes arranging her hair in a way that looked casual but probably took professional training to achieve. "Big day tomorrow?" I asked. "Just the party," she said, not meeting my eyes in the bathroom mirror. "Should be fun." Fun, right. I lay in bed that night listening to her breathe, wondering when exactly my wife had become a stranger. Wondering if she'd always been one, and I'd just been too busy managing steel to notice the stress fractures in my own marriage. Tomorrow night, I'd find out just how much pressure this particular structure could handle before it came apart completely. The alarm went off at 6:30, same as always. Alicia was already up, which was unusual for a Saturday. She was standing at the kitchen window with her coffee, staring out at nothing in particular. "Sleep okay?" I asked. "Fine," she said, still not looking at me. "Just thinking about work stuff." Work stuff? On a Saturday morning? Before a Halloween party where her boyfriend would probably be dressed as Tarzan or Thor or some other character that required maximum muscle exposure. I poured my own coffee and settled in to watch the final act of my marriage play out. Tonight, the steel would either bend or break. Either way, I'd finally know exactly what I was dealing with. Richard's house looked like a Halloween store had exploded and then been reassembled by someone with too much time and too little taste. Orange lights wrapped around every available surface, plastic skeletons hung from the trees, and someone had set up a fog machine on the front porch that made the whole place look like a low-budget horror movie set. "Ahoy there, matey!" Richard called out as we approached the front door. He was dressed as a vampire, complete with plastic fangs that made him lisp. "Ready for a night of plundering and pillaging?" I adjusted my pirate hat and grinned. Something like that. Alicia had barely spoken during the drive over. She'd spent the entire 20 minutes checking her appearance in the passenger mirror and responding to text messages. The Catwoman costume was everything she'd promised. Black leather that fit like it had been painted on, complete with ears and a tail that swished when she walked. She looked incredible, which was probably the point. "You look amazing," I told her as we walked up the driveway. "Thanks," she said, but she was scanning the crowd of costumed partygoers like she was looking for someone specific. The inside of Richard's house was packed with people I half recognized from various social circles. Teachers from the local schools, folks from the plant, Alicia's coworkers, neighbors, and friends of friends. The usual suburban Halloween crowd, everyone trying a little too hard to recapture some version of their younger selves. I grabbed a beer from the kitchen and started making the rounds, playing the part of the sociable husband. Richard's wife Nikki was dressed as a witch, stirring something orange and probably alcoholic in a large cauldron. "Greg," she called out, "love the pirate look, very swashbuckling." "Thanks." Figured it was time to embrace my inner pirate. She gave me a look that suggested she might know more about my situation than she was letting on. Nikki was sharp that way. She noticed things other people missed and remembered details that seemed unimportant at the time. "Alicia looks stunning tonight," she said, nodding toward where my wife was chatting with a group of her coworkers near the fireplace. "Yeah, she does." That costume must have cost a fortune. It had. $300 for something she'd wear once, though I was starting to suspect the intended audience wasn't me. That's when I saw him. Dominic Reyes had apparently decided to go with the Tarzan theme, which meant he was basically wearing a loincloth and nothing else. His chest was oiled up like he was competing in a bodybuilding contest, and he'd somehow managed to get his hair to look artfully messy in a way that probably required professional products. He was talking to a blonde woman I didn't recognize, but his eyes kept drifting toward Alicia, and hers kept drifting toward him. "Friend of yours?" Nikki asked, following my gaze. "Something like that." The next hour was like watching a nature documentary about mating rituals. Alicia and Dom circled each other through the party, never talking directly, but always somehow ending up in the same conversations. She'd laugh a little too loud at jokes that weren't that funny. He'd flex a little more obviously whenever she was nearby. I positioned myself at the kitchen island with a good view of the living room and settled in to watch the show. Richard joined me after a while, bringing fresh beers and the kind of gossip that only comes from hosting parties where everyone drinks too much. "So that's the famous Dom," he said, nodding toward where Tarzan was now demonstrating some kind of exercise move to a captivated audience. "You know about Dom?" Nikki mentioned some workplace drama. Didn't realize he was built like a comic book character. "Yeah, well, apparently that's what passes for professional development these days." Richard gave me a look. "You okay, man? You seem a little tense." "Just enjoying the party." The breaking point came around 10 o'clock. I was in the kitchen getting another beer when I heard Alicia's laugh from the next room. Not her regular laugh, but the one she used to save for me. The intimate one, soft and genuine and full of promise. I walked into the living room to find her and Dom standing close together near the back door, having what looked like a very private conversation. Her hand was on his arm, right on that oiled bicep, and she was looking up at him like he just said something incredibly clever. That's when the steel finally snapped. I walked over with my beer in hand and my best fake smile plastered on my face. "Hey, honey, having a good time?" Alicia jumped like she'd been caught doing something wrong, which she had. "Oh, Greg, yes, just talking shop with Dom here." "Shop talk?" I repeated. "At a Halloween party? How dedicated." Dom turned to face me, and I got my first good look at Alicia's boyfriend up close. He was exactly what I'd expected. Handsome in a generic way, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to think too hard about anything. "You must be Greg," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Dom, work with your wife." "Yeah, I figured." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip that went on just a little too long. "Nice costume. Very minimal." He laughed like I'd made a joke. Instead of backing down or trying to defuse the situation, Dom decided to double down on the arrogance. "Look, buddy, I don't know what kind of paranoid fantasies you've been cooking up." I didn't let him finish. My hand moved before my brain had fully processed the decision. And suddenly, Dom was staggering backward, with his hand pressed to his cheek and a look of complete shock on his face. The kitchen erupted. Someone screamed, someone else started cursing, and Richard rushed forward to get between us. But I was already stepping back, my hand stinging and my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. "Welcome to the jungle, Dom," I said quietly. Then I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room full of staring costumed faces, and out the front door into the cool October night. I sat in my car for a long time, waiting for my hands to stop shaking and trying to figure out what happened next. The party continued inside. I could hear the music and laughter through the windows, but the sound felt like it was coming from another world. After about 20 minutes, Alicia came out. She'd taken off the cat ears and her carefully applied makeup was smudged. She looked like what she was, a woman whose secret had just exploded in front of half the town. "Get in," I said when she approached the passenger door. She hesitated, then climbed into the car. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us staring at Richard's house like it might provide some kind of explanation for what had just happened. "Greg," she finally said, "we need to talk." "Yeah," I agreed, "we really do." But not tonight. Tonight, the steel had finally snapped, and we both needed time to figure out what was left in the wreckage. I started the car and drove us home through empty suburban streets, both of us lost in our own thoughts about how exactly 15 years of marriage had led to this moment. Tomorrow, we'd start dealing with the consequences. Tonight, I just wanted to get through the next few hours without anything else breaking apart. The drive home was 23 minutes of pure silence. Not the comfortable quiet of a long marriage, but the heavy, suffocating kind that settles over a room after someone said something unforgivable. Alicia stared out the passenger window like she was memorizing the streetlights. I focused on driving and tried not to think about how my hand still stung from connecting with Dom's face. When we pulled into our driveway, she finally spoke. "I suppose you want explanations." "I suppose I do." She nodded, still not looking at me. Can we do this tomorrow? I need to think about what to say." "You need to think about what to say." I repeated the words slowly, tasting them. 15 years of marriage and you need to think about what to say? Greg, please, it's complicated. No, Alicia, it's really not. I got out of the car and walked into the house, leaving her to follow or not. She followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a countdown timer. Click, click, click. Time's up. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat down at the kitchen table. Alicia hovered near the doorway, still in her Catwoman costume, looking like she was trying to decide between fight or flight. How long? I asked. Greg, how long, Alicia? She closed her eyes. 14 months. 14 months. Over a year of lies, of fake work trips and mysterious text messages and lipstick on coffee cups. Greg, she said, sitting down across from me, I know I've hurt you. I know I've betrayed your trust in the worst possible way, but we can get through this. We can go to counseling, we can work on our communication, we can what? Pretend the last 14 months didn't happen? We can learn from them. What exactly did you learn? She was quiet for a moment, thinking. I learned that I need more attention than I was getting. I learned that I need to feel desired, not just needed. I learned that our marriage had become routine and comfortable and safe, but not passionate. And what did I learn? I don't know. What did you learn? I learned that my wife is a liar. I learned that she's been making a fool of me in front of half the town for over a year. I learned that she pities me for not being exciting enough to hold her interest. That's not. I learned that she's capable of looking me in the eye every morning and telling me she loves me while she's planning her next romantic getaway with her boyfriend. Greg, please. Most importantly, I learned that the woman I married 15 years ago doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. Alicia started crying then, real tears this time, not the careful kind designed to get sympathy. She does exist. I'm still here. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I'm still the woman you married. No, I said, quietly, you're not. I got up from the table, leaving the elaborate breakfast untouched. I'm going to Richard's to apologize for ruining his party. Guy doesn't live in this neighborhood, doesn't know anyone here, but suddenly he's at every barbecue and block party. Why didn't anyone tell me? Another look between them. What were we supposed to say? Nikki asked. Hey, Greg, we think your wife might be cheating on you based on some suspicious behavior and gossip? Yes, that's exactly what you were supposed to say. Would you have believed us? I thought about it. Would I have? Or would I have defended Alicia, made excuses, convinced my friends were seeing things that weren't there? I don't know, I admitted. That's why we didn't say anything, Richard said. Marriage is complicated. Sometimes people work things out. And sometimes they don't. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee and listening to Nikki's eggs sizzle in the pan. Finally, Richard spoke up. So, what's the plan? Lawyers, divorce, starting over at 38. Could be worse. How? Could be starting over at 48. He had a point. I spent the rest of the morning at Richard's, helping clean up the party debris and trying to avoid thinking about what was waiting for me at home. But eventually, I couldn't put it off any longer. Alicia's car was gone when I got back. There was a note on the kitchen table. Gone to think, back tonight. We need to talk. A. Gone to think. Probably gone to Dom's place for one last romantic consultation about how to handle her suddenly suspicious husband. I looked around the kitchen, at the breakfast she'd made and I'd abandoned, at the coffee cups and the carefully set table, and all the props of a normal Sunday morning. Then I went upstairs and started making phone calls. First, my lawyer, then my bank. I know I have a funny way of showing it lately, but I do. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, thinking about love and marriage and the difference between the two. Then I made another phone call. Mrs. Kowalski, it's Greg Griffin from next door. I hope I'm not calling too early. No, everything's fine. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I was wondering if you might have a few minutes to chat. Mrs. Kowalski was 73 years old, lived alone with 3 cats, and knew more about the neighborhood's business than the FBI. She was also the kind of person who believed information should be shared freely, especially if it involved scandal. 20 minutes later, she was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and an expression of barely contained excitement. "I always suspected something was going on," she said, shaking her head. "The way that man would drive by here at odd hours, and Alicia leaving at strange times, all dressed up for work meetings." "You saw Dom here?" "Oh yes, several times. Usually when you were at work. He'd park down the street and walk up like he was trying not to be seen." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. When was this? Started maybe 6 months ago? He'd come by during lunch sometimes, stay for an hour or two. I always wondered what kind of work meetings happen in people's living rooms. 6 months. Dom had been in my house, probably in my bed, while I was at the plant managing steel production and thinking my marriage was solid. "Mrs. Kowalski," I said carefully, "how many people in the neighborhood know about this?" "Well, I may have mentioned it to a few people. Anything else?" "His employment record shows a couple of disciplinary actions for inappropriate workplace conduct. Nothing that stuck, but there's a pattern there too." "Send me everything you've got. Already in your email." I spent the next hour reviewing the private investigator's report. Dom wasn't just a muscle-bound homewrecker. He was a muscle-bound homewrecker with anger management issues and a history of inappropriate behavior with women. Perfect. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Griffin, this is Dom. We need to talk." "Do we?" "Yeah, we do. Meet me at Murphy's Bar on 5th Street, 1 hour." "I don't think that's a good idea." "I think it's a great idea, unless you're scared." The line went quiet. He was actually trying to goad me into meeting him by questioning my courage, like we were in high school. "Murphy's Bar," I said, 1 hour. I arrived at Murphy's 15 minutes early and picked a table with a good view of the entrance. The place was mostly empty. A few construction workers having lunch, an old man nursing a beer and watching the news. Perfect audience for whatever Dom had planned. He showed up right on time, looking like he'd spent the morning in the gym working off his frustration. He was wearing a tight t-shirt that showed off all that muscle he was so proud of, and he walked with the kind of swagger that suggested he thought he was intimidating. "Griffin," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Dom, we have a problem." "Do we?" "Yeah, you embarrassed me at that party, made me look bad in front of people." "You made yourself look bad. I just pointed it out." His jaw tightened. "Always when your truck wasn't in the driveway." She showed me page after page of entries, a complete record of Dom's visits to my house. Times, dates, duration of visits, even notes about what he was wearing and whether he brought flowers or gifts. "Martha," I said carefully, "would you be willing to share this information with my attorney?" "Of course, dear. I assumed that's why you were asking." "And would you be comfortable discussing what you observed with other neighbors?" "Well, I may have already mentioned some of it to the book club ladies and the garden society and possibly the church auxiliary." Martha's observations had apparently already made their way through every social network in the neighborhood. By now, half the town probably knew about Dom's regular visits to my house. Perfect. I spent the rest of the afternoon making strategic phone calls. My lawyer, to discuss the evidence I'd gathered, my bank, to move more assets into protected accounts, and my private investigator, to dig deeper into Dom's background. "Found something interesting," he told me. "Dom's ex-wife, Marina. She lives about 20 minutes from you, and based on what I'm seeing, she's got her own reasons to dislike your wife's boyfriend." "What kind of reasons?" "The kind that might make her interested in having a conversation with you." He gave me Marina's contact information, along with a warning. "She's tough, former military, works in security now. Don't underestimate her." I called Marina that evening, after Alicia had gone upstairs to take one of her increasingly long showers. "This is Marina." "Hi, this is Greg Griffin. I think we have a mutual acquaintance." "If you're talking about Dom, he's not my acquaintance." "He's my mistake." "I was hoping we could talk." "About what?"
about how my wife has been spending her work trips for the past 14 months. There was a long pause. Your wife? Alicia Griffin works at Pinnacle Manufacturing. Another pause, longer this time. Son of a dog. I take it this is news to you? Oh, it's news, all right. Where do you want to meet? We arranged to meet the next evening at a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. I had no idea what to expect from Dom's ex-wife, but I had a feeling she was going to be a valuable ally. Thursday dragged by with the weight of anticipation. Alicia was acting increasingly nervous, checking her phone constantly and jumping every time it rang. She'd tried to initiate several conversations about working things out and moving forward together, but I'd kept my responses non-committal. Greg, she said over dinner, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but we can't live like this forever. Like what? Like strangers, like we're just waiting for something to happen. Something is going to happen. We both know that. It doesn't have to. We could go to counseling, we could take a vacation, spend some time reconnecting. Where would we go? The Mountain View Resort? She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Fair stopped being relevant about 14 months ago. I've apologized. I've ended things with Dom. What else do you want me to do? I want you to understand that apologies don't erase betrayal. So what? We're just going to get divorced? Throw away 15 years of marriage? You threw it away. I'm just cleaning up the mess. She started crying then, the kind of tears that were probably genuine but felt manipulative anyway.
Including the one he's been setting up to replace your wife. That stopped me cold. There's already someone else? There's always someone else. Dom doesn't like to be alone between conquests. Who is she? Jessica Walsh, married, works in marketing at a company downtown. Dom's been laying the groundwork for about 2 months now. Does Alicia know? I doubt it. Dom's very good at compartmentalizing his affairs. I sat back in my chair trying to process this information. While Alicia was agonizing over ending their relationship and trying to save our marriage, Dom was already planning his next conquest. The betrayal was so complete, it was almost admirable in its thoroughness. Marina, I said, I think it's time to make Dom famous. I was hoping you'd say that. We shook hands outside the coffee shop, two people united by a common enemy and a shared desire for justice. Or revenge. At this point, the distinction didn't seem particularly important. Friday morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Alicia was already gone. She'd been leaving earlier each day, probably trying to avoid the increasingly tense atmosphere at home. I made coffee, checked my email, and found a message from Marina with the subject line, Care Package. The attachment contained everything she'd promised and more. Financial records, photographs, communication logs, and detailed profiles of Dom's previous and current targets. It was a complete dossier on a serial adulterer, documented with the thoroughness of a federal investigation. I spent the morning organizing the information and preparing for the next phase of Operation Exposure. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I thought he was different, she said. They all think that. It's part of his system. My marriage isn't perfect, but it's not worth throwing away for someone who sees you as interchangeable entertainment. She nodded, wiping her eyes. What happens now? Now you go home to your husband and decide whether your marriage is worth fighting for, and I continue documenting Dom's pattern so other women don't have to learn the hard way. Are you going to expose him publicly? I'm going to make sure people know who they're dealing with. Jessica gathered her things and stood to leave, then turned back. Thank you. I almost made a terrible mistake. We all almost make terrible mistakes. The lucky ones get warned in time. After she left, I sat in the Starbucks for a while, thinking about patterns and choices and the difference between justice and revenge. Then I called Marina. How did it go? She asked. Jessica Walsh is no longer part of Dom's future plans. Good, that's one woman who won't have to learn the hard way. What about the others, the ones from his past? I've already reached out to 2 of them. They're very interested in sharing their experiences. And the third? She moved out of state, but she's willing to provide a written statement about Dom's behavior during their affair. Marina, are you sure you want to do this? Once we go public, there's no taking it back. Greg, I've been waiting 2 years for someone to give me an excuse to destroy Dom Rias. You're not just giving me an excuse, you're giving me a partner. Partners then. Partners.
And Greg? Yeah? Dom has no idea what's coming. I spent the weekend putting the finishing touches on our evidence package. By Sunday night, we had a complete dossier on Dom's pattern of behavior, including financial records, photographs, witness statements, and documentation of his history of harassment and intimidation. Monday morning, Operation Exposure would begin in earnest. Alicia came home Sunday evening looking exhausted and defeated. She'd spent the weekend at her sister's house, probably getting advice about how to save a marriage that was already over. Greg, she said, setting her overnight bag by the door, we need to make a decision about our future. I've already made my decision. I know you have, but I'm asking you to reconsider. Why? Because 15 years of marriage should count for something, because people make mistakes and deserve second chances, because I love you and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. I looked at her, standing there in our living room, still beautiful, still the woman I'd married 15 years ago in many ways, but also the woman who'd spent 14 months lying to my face while she conducted a systematic affair with a man who saw her as disposable entertainment. Alicia, I said gently, what would you say if I told you Dom has been planning to replace you for months? What do you mean, replace me? I mean, he's already been setting up his next affair with another married woman. While you were agonizing over whether to choose him or me, he was already moving on to his next conquest. The color drained from her face. That's not true. It is true. I have some information about one of your employees that I think you need to see. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of cold rain that makes you want to stay in bed and pretend the world doesn't exist. Unfortunately, the world was very much existing, and it was about to become a much smaller place for Dominic Reyes. I'd spent Monday evening with Alicia, going through her phone and email accounts to document every interaction she'd had with Dom over the past 14 months. It was brutal work, reading their romantic exchanges, seeing the photos they'd shared, understanding the depth of their emotional connection, but it was also illuminating. Dom's communications revealed a man who was calculating, manipulative, and completely convinced of his own irresistibility. He'd used the same lines on Alicia that he'd apparently used on his previous targets, the same romantic gestures, even the same pet names. She hadn't been special to him. She'd been a script he was reading for the 4th or 5th time. Look at this, Alicia said, showing me a text thread from 6 months ago. He's asking me to meet him at the same restaurant where he took that woman Marina showed us photos of. Same booth? Same booth. Even ordered the same wine. Efficient. I thought he was being romantic. Turns out he was just being lazy. The evidence we'd compiled was devastating. Financial records showing a pattern of hotel and restaurant charges that coincided with his affairs. Communications revealing his systematic approach to seduction. Witness statements from his previous targets describing identical experiences, and now Alicia's cooperation providing inside details about his methods and future plans. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. Marina. Phase 1 is complete, she said. Dom said something to Alicia that made her flinch, then stormed toward the exit. He made it about halfway to the door before he noticed me sitting at my table, watching the show with obvious satisfaction. You, he said, changing direction and walking toward me, this is your doing. Sit down, Dom. You've been investigating me. You and that crazy ex-wife of mine. Sit down. You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've got this all figured out. I think I've got enough figured out. Sit down. He sat, probably more out of exhaustion than compliance. Up close, he looked like a man who just realized that his carefully constructed world was falling apart. What do you want? He asked. I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge, Dom. This is about consequences. Consequences for what? For treating married women like disposable entertainment, for manipulating people who trusted you,
for being a predator who hides behind charm and muscles. I never forced anyone to do anything. No, you just systematically identified vulnerable women and exploited their weaknesses for your own gratification. They were adults making adult choices. They were people making choices based on incomplete information you deliberately withheld. Alicia joined us at the table, her face flushed but her expression resolute. Tell him, I said. Tell me what? Tell him about Jessica Walsh. Dom's face went pale again. What about Jessica? Tell him how you've been setting up your next affair while pretending to care about your current one. Dom, Alicia said quietly, I know about Jessica. I know about the others before me. He walked toward the exit, moving faster with each step, probably realizing that his reputation in this town was about to become a very expensive liability. Think he'll leave town? Alicia asked. Probably. Marina says he doesn't handle humiliation well. Good. Maybe Jessica Walsh and the next woman after her will be safe. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the social media storm spread through the bar and beyond. My phone was buzzing constantly with messages from people who wanted more details, people who'd had their own suspicious encounters with Dom, people who were sharing the information with their own networks. Greg, Alicia said finally, thank you. For what? For stopping him, for making sure other women don't go through what I went through. You helped stop him. That counts for something. Does it count for enough? I looked at her. This woman I'd shared 15 years of my life with. This woman who'd betrayed me completely and then helped me get justice for that betrayal. It counts for something, I said, but not for everything. She nodded. I understand. Do you? I understand that some mistakes can't be fixed, some trust can't be rebuilt, some marriages can't survive betrayal, even when both people want them to. And I understand that helping you expose Dom doesn't earn me forgiveness.